Hi there. So, just a quick one. We're going to do a little exercise carrying on from what we did last week, but this week we're going to do a little exercise with textures. We're going to use something called the multi-sub object material. Now, last week we looked at multi-sub object materials and we discussed the fact that polygons have 5 sub-object levels. So this idea of an object having objects within it, or sub-objects within it, is becoming more frequent and common to the way that we're thinking about modelling. So today we're going to use something called a multi-sub-object material. So let me just pick up on where we were last week. We had a Gengon in our stack with an FFD 2x2, and then we had an edit poly over the top, and we were selecting these edges and we were chamfering these edges to give us kind of little glass panels of some sort. That's probably fine, and just say OK to that. Okay, now before I'd selected those edges, I'd gone into my polygon and I had made a selection set which is no longer there, so never mind. Didn't save it properly, so I'll just go through these again. And I'm going to just save those, and I'll just call it panels. Okay, so I can select those panels whenever I want at the sub-object polygon level, and those panels, I think we did something like a little bevel, if I'm right, a little tiny bevel and something like that. Okay, so we had an object not too dissimilar to this, and then it had its stand or etc. So anyway, not to concentrate on those things. So there we go, we've got our model. Now, each one of these polygons at the sub-object level, each one of these polygons can have what is called an ID, an identifier basically. And it's a numerical identifier, so what we can do is we can select them all and say, I want everything to have an ID of 1. So I've just highlighted, look for the polygon material IDs rollout, and I've just highlighted the number 1. What I like to do is just hit return or enter, just to be absolutely sure that everything starts with an ID of 1. Okay, so we've done one ID, pretty straightforward at the sub-object level, polygon sub-object level. Each poly can have an ID. Okay. I'm just going to call up my materials, and here it is. And in here I can look for there it is on the right, on the left hand side. Already in the general materials there's something called a multi-sub object material, so just drag that into your window, and it comes with 10 preset sub object materials, so 1 to 10. You can change that number anytime you want. You could have like 2 or 4, or I think the top number is something like 99, but let's go for 3. Okay, now let's go for 4 and return. This is just an experiment, so don't be worrying about getting a specific number in there. I'm just experimenting. And basically each one of these materials is going to be attached to a specific ID number that we're going to rig up inside the sub-object polygon level, just like I did a moment ago. So this first ID number, number 1, I'm going to give it a material. So I'm going to start with an Arnold surface. I'll go with a standard surface. So number 1, standard surface. And I'll just call it ID1 to keep things nice and clear, and I'll give it a base colour of, I'll go pink. Okay, so just pull that, if I can, just pull that down for a sec, and what I can do now is, what's that over there? Ooh, couldn't quite see, that's the multi-sub object material. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say I want this multi-sub object material to be attached to this object, so I'm just clicking, dragging it out, That's one way of doing it. The other way of attaching that, so I'll just undo that, Control Z. The other way of applying that material to this object is simply to make sure that the object itself is selected, so it's highlighted. You can see that blue kind of cyan. It's a cyan colour, blue cyan line all the way around it. So you make that active, you go to material, you make it active, and then top left hand corner, assign material to selection. Okay, so both ways do it, and you can see that anything that's got the ID number of number 1 is now currently pink. Okay, that's kind of what we would expect given what we did. So now let's go in to the polygons and say I want my panels to be selected, so I'm going to select those panels and I'm going to give them an ID number of 2. So I'm going to set the ID number to 2, hit return, and now they won't be pink anymore because they don't correspond with this material, this ID number 1. So they are no longer assigned that material. What they are waiting for is a material to land in this slot here. So let's do that. Let's put a little material in that slot. Just pull that in a little tiny bit. Pull that in a little tiny bit. Do you know what you can do as well to make things easier? I think you can just double click these, or you can collapse them. Where is it? There's a collapse option. Blah, 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 blah. Can't quite see it. I'm pretty sure double click. That does it. Sorry, that little. Okay, that makes life a bit easier just while we're working on things. So number 2, I'm going to give it a material, and I could theoretically just give it a Arnold material and give it a colour like I did before. I could even use that Arnold material to set up a glass, but to make a really fast and, alright glass, passable glass, we'll just go to General and we'll go to Physical Material. And the Physical Material has, it kind of came before Arnold, and it was working with a different render engine. Mental Ray and V-Ray will accept this physical material, and I think it was originally written for those engines. Arnold, you can create your own glass inside Arnold, but there's a few steps involved, so I'm just going to keep it simple for now. So we take this glass and we look for its presets, and it's got all sorts in here, glass, rough concrete, frosted glass. I like the frosted glass one, so let's pop that in there. And same again, I'll just put that there. Now we've already applied this material to our object, so theoretically it should be there. When I remove this window, it should be there, and it is. It is there now. Okay, doesn't look like much at the moment, so I'll just close this down for a sec. Doesn't look like much at the minute, but if we think about it, all we need to do is go to our front window, create a light. So I'm going to click on light, go to Arnold. I'm going to set a little Arnold light up, and I'm just going to drag it and point it at this. In fact, I'm not going to do that, just because I know that isn't what you want, or what you're probably going to need. I'll set an Arnold light up, but I'm going to stick it right in the middle, and I'm going to change its shape from a quad to a point or a spot. I'm going to go for a point light, and I'll just pop it in there. Okay, so theoretically, if I hit my top, T for top, F for front, looks pretty central. It's not perfect, but it'll do. It should now be emitting light into this world space. Now, before we go any further and do a quick render, it'll probably come out black because there's a few little things we need to do before that light will work properly. So let's just look at a couple of properties. Intensity and exposure, 1 and 7, they're pretty standard. We'll just leave them as they are, okay? So we won't touch them. We can get inside the colour and do a little bit of modulation of the colour, so we'll give it a little bit of warmth. Okay, and we can do that later on. We can do it by like Kelvin numbers and various presets, which are kind of interesting. Some of these presets like fluorescent lights, incandescent lights, etc. But we'll just use this colour for now. So there's a radius, which we need to be aware of, and we'll control that as well. And then there's these two settings. We'll worry about samples and everything a little bit later on. It's set to cast shadows, which is important. Okay, so it still isn't going to do anything until we go into the Environment tab, which is in Rendering. And in the Environment tab, we need to just do a couple little adjustments in here. So every time you use an Arnold light, you must go into the Environment tab and you must do the following. It's pretty straightforward, but just go to Physical Camera Exposure Control and set that on. Leave that set to 0. We don't need to do anything with it just yet. But this exposure value here, normally I start off with it about 12, and then I work either down if it's a dark scene and I need to lighten it, or if it's a really bright scene I go the other way. So I'll go for 12, and I'll go back in here and I'll just change this viewport to perspective, and I'm just going to put a ground plane on the floor, so just so I can understand if things are working out properly. Oh, didn't mean to move. I didn't want to move that without moving the light, so I need to move the two things together. Just lift them up, and I'm still not doing it. And okay, just lift that up in the air. I'm still not doing it. I'm having a problem with the with my selection. I don't know what it is. There's some little glitch at the minute with my marquee selection. But anyway, there we go. There's our light hovering in the air. And okay, our settings are pretty straightforward. Physical camera exposure controls been selected. We've set it to 0. I often just turn it off because I'm not using it. I tend to use the global light and then sort the global light out. It makes sense when you think about it. It's like if you put a light bulb on, a 60-watt light bulb on, in a small, tiny room, it seems to fill the room with light. But if you put that same small light bulb on in a absolutely enormous Amazon factory in the middle of the night, and it's just one light bulb, it hardly does anything. So the environment is really important, and this little global exposure value is important. So you always got to go back here and work between that and the light settings, which if you'll just pardon me for 2 secs, click on the light, he says. I can't quite get to it, so I'm just going to use my Scene Explorer. I'm just going to dock that Scene Explorer to the left hand side. So the light settings, which can be modified in here, and so you can always go back and modify these settings. So I move between these settings and this global exposure. Okay, so now let's see what we've got. So just to test things out, I'm just going to go from, in my perspective window, I'm going to change it from standard to active shade using Arnold. And who knows what's about to happen? It takes a little moment. Nothing might happen, but it should give us a little something. Okay, so we've now got a light inside the object, casting a light out into the world, and you know what? I think we can begin to control that now. So I can control the global exposure. So it looks like I'm turning the light up, but I'm not. I'm kind of like affecting the environment in relationship to the light. The light isn't actually changing anything just yet, but I'm just turning that up a wee bit. So 8.7 looks good. So if I go to 9, that feels about right. Okay, now I'll go to my light, and in here I've got my point, and my point can be really tiny, or it can have a really big effect in the scene. And this is all looking good. We've got our frosted glass, we've got our light casting shadow from through, because obviously there's a base to this lamp and there's a top to it, so it's not, the light isn't going through there, it's only going through the material that lets it out into the world, which is our ID number 2 material, which is the frosted glass. So, well, that's all very well and good. I just want to round this up real quick with a quick look at the material one more time. So just hit M for materials, and I just want to focus on these two. So The pink, yeah, it's, you know, it seemed like a good idea at the time, but I can change that now. I'll change that pink into something else, something a little bit darker. So let's get in here and change our pink into, oh, it's kind of nice like that actually. I kind of like that feel. That's nice. Okay, this is great. Well, it's not great, but it's all right. It's not a bad start. But we've only got 2 materials, which is fine. But we could go wild now. We could actually say, all right, I want these external polygons, these ones here. Oh, he says. I'll go to my polygon. This, like that one there, for example, and this one here. As I say, I'm struggling to make little selections for some reason. It will always lag when you've got the Arnold active shade on. It always lags, so just be prepared for that. There's a little bit of lag there. Okay, so for these, yeah, maybe I want to set them a new idea. Maybe I want them to set them an ID of 3. Okay, so I go back over here now, and I'm going to, just review my position. There we go. I'm just going to pull that out and say I want a new material now. On this material, I'm going to go general. I'm going to go physical again. Or am I? Yeah. Okay, I'll go physical again. And this time I'll take something like a, I don't know. Matte gold, no. Sandblasted silver, yeah, alright. I don't know what effect that's going to have, but I'll put it on anyway. Okay, sandblasted effect. I don't need to wire this up again because remember we've already applied our IDs, and I minimise that and come out of here. It's hard to tell. I knew that would happen. It's kind of hard to tell, but there is actually a new material on there now. There's like a silver on there, whereas everything else has that kind of like greeny blue tint to it. So, okay, I'll just hit Z, that we're looking down at this, and maybe I'll go to polygon, maybe I'll go right to the base, and I'll say, these polys here, I see I'm struggling, I don't know why it's not doing multiple selections for me. I've got some gremlin in my little system. Okay, these polys here, this is me just finishing things off. These polys here, I'm going to give those polygons an ID of 4. Okay, and just so that we definitely know that that's worked, I'll go back down to this and I'll give this a very definite colour. So Arnold surface, standard surface, and this is going to have a very standard, very definite colour. I'm going to make it yellow just so we can definitely see it. Close that down, and when I deselect the polygons, it should be yellow. But it's receiving no light, so it's hard to see if it's actually yellow because it's receiving no light. So I might just put another little light source in there. So I'm going to go to Arnold, and this time I'm going to put in a, it's dangerous to put in a sky dome in because it's just going to blitz everything with light. I don't want to put a quad in, but go on, I'll put a sky dome in, but I'll have to control it a lot. Everything's going to go pretty white pretty soon. Anyway, there we go, it's too much. So the sky dome comes down, I think 0.3. Okay, we've got a bit of light now. Yeah, oh, sorry. I do find that once I've created a light, I need to go back and select the move tool to stop creating new lights. That really hasn't helped my system. Okay, I'm going to stop because I've got a call coming in. Okay, we'll pick this up and work with it tomorrow.